All right, welcome for some affordable fixed blade content. Now, in our recent episode, we took a look at a couple of cold steel peacemakers. Affordable, Scandi ground, very light. Well, cold steel presents them as Marshall tools, but I also tested them as utility tools. And there were certain things I really liked about them, but a couple of areas they fell short, I'm going to say design-wise for me. And we'll talk about that today. But in that video I mentioned that as I was watching other reviews of the Peacemakers, and there are a lot of them on YouTube, one reviewer specifically said, if you're looking for a really good, really affordable 4-inch Scandi ground fixed blade knife for field use, get yourself a Mora Companion. So I did, and I tested it side by side against the Peacemakers. And I'm going to say up front, for the 16-ish US dollars I spent on this thing, wow, I am really impressed. First up, let's talk about the sheath. Compared to, well, whatever they were thinking with the Peacemaker knives that drove me crazy, this is a simple, basic breath of fresh air. It is a one-piece polymer design. I don't know if it's glass-filled. We'll talk about that in a second. With an integrated belt or pocket clip that, yes, unlike whatever they were thinking here, is big enough to fit on a standard size belt, and it is not a fight getting on and off. Yet it does have retention hooks to keep it from, well, going anywhere accidentally. So one-piece design reminds me a lot of what I see on Cold Steel Light Series knives, and I've acquired several of those, so we'll take a look at them as we're on kind of an affordability kick. But compared to those knives, yeah, I feel like they put, well, a little bit more thought and detail into this, well, really basic, affordable design. Let's talk about retention first. You can see from the shape of it that the grip of the knife is about 1/4 of the way into the mouth of the sheath. But that still leaves me enough real estate that I can get 3 fingers around it to deploy it. And yeah, they even added a little bit of a thumb ramp to push against if I need it. And yeah, lockup is positive. It's not going anywhere accidentally, but it's not too much of a struggle to deploy, especially when it's clipped to my belt. Now, one thing I did complain about with this in the Peacemakers is, yeah, it is a big old tube of plastic. Is it glass filled? Could that potentially damage the edge if it rubs against it? I don't know, but I'm not concerned about that here. Now, on the Peacemaker knives, that edge did consistently rub against the side of the sheath during drawing and resheathing, but it does not in this case because of design. The way this locks in, you can kind of see it from the outside, plenty of room front to back, and it's locking it in such a way that it's holding the edge quite a distance from the front of that sheath. And when it's locked in there, it's locked in there firm. There's no side-to-side scrape, no rattle, no nothing. So I'm not really concerned about the sheath damaging the edge. And they did indeed drill out the bottom of it for a drainage hole for field use. Taking a look at the friendly end, Mora is calling this a one-piece polymer handle with a grip texture. Basically a rubberized outer coating that is indeed very tacky. Even with wet hands, you're going to have good purchase and control. Don't know if it's full tang or not. My magnets aren't quite sure. This isn't the most magnetic of steels, and we'll talk about that in a second. But if you happen to know how far the tang goes down, let me know in the comments. Certainly doesn't stick out the butt of the knife or anything like that. But shape of grip, it's a very nice palm swell. Very comfortable in hand, no hot spots. I can make use of pretty much the entire length of the grip. Put my thumb on the back, there's a bit of a shelf here. Or yeah, because there's no back guard, I can get it all the way up on the back of the knife. And we'll talk about how it feels in, well, various tasks, performance, Marshall handling. Now, length of a grip, 4.5 inches, 12 centimeters. With my medium width hands, yeah, it is pretty hand-filling. If you had bigger hands than me, this might feel small. Might want to go for a bigger option. But for me, just right. Width of grip front to back at the widest point of the swell is 1.25 inches, about 3 centimeters. Thickness is 3/4 inch, about 2 centimeters. All right, the business end. Now for the $16 I paid for this on Amazon, I'll put the link down in the description. What I got is a 12C27 Sandvik blade that is indeed stamped made in Sweden. Now my test files are saying, well, my 60 barely cuts it. My 55 absolutely doesn't, so maybe the higher end of the 50s, maybe edging into 60 HRC. It's got kind of a mirror polish to it, Scandi grind, flat-sided, and it's not straight-backed. It has a little bit of a clip drop to it. But dimensions, all right, you've got a 4-inch total length of blade, so 10 centimeters. That in the straight section is 3/4 inch, 2 centimeters wide. Now thickness, they're saying 2 millimeters, but my calipers are saying a little bit more, maybe towards 2.5 millimeters. So it is a slim blade, and we'll see how it does in my durability tests. But I'm really finding I'm getting some good use out of this shape geometry of blade. Overall length is 8 3/4 inches, 22 centimeters. Point of balance is floating about 3/4 inch down, kind of in this top little finger groove. We'll talk about that in handling. But okay, the weight. The knife itself, 3 ounces. 106 grams. But knife and sheath together, that's only 4 ounces. So 141 grams. So very light in hand, very light in carry. Let's go ahead and roll in my test footage. We'll talk about how it did, and then I'll talk about, of course, how I feel about it as a potential martial tool. Mora companion. Pretty impressive. Right into the redwood. Edge up. Reverse. Mora companion. Let's do a little of my idle walking stick project carving. Yeah, it's a nice, even after mangling the edge a bit on a bamboo test, I did refresh it, but yeah, it is a really nice fine carving tool. Really love the way it feels. And then I can get my thumb on the back of it. Come back the other way, how about that? Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Check the Mora out on carving some bark off. It's a dry piece of fur. A little deeper in the wood. Yeah, nice carving tool, even though I damaged the edge a little bit on that bamboo test. It still works. Alright, now considering what happened during the bamboo test, I'm not really trying to chop the wood, but let's see what happens. Feels good. A little bit of weight, especially for its lack of weight. And, alright, this time it looks fine. Alright, a little nervous about this, considering what happened in the bamboo test. Mora companion, 3/4 inch, dry ash branch. Okay, that was impressive. And it looks okay. So performance-wise, how does it do? Well, the first job I did with it was made myself breakfast, prepped some food. And yeah, it's a great slicey knife for that kind of work. Then I had a bunch of cardboard I needed to cut up. It was recycling day, and I tested it side by side with the Peacemakers. And they're both really slicey, but I feel like I can get a much better grip, much better control over this one. And yeah, I get my thumb up on the back of the blade. So I'm going to say this did better than the Peacemakers at that job, but it was close. Into the hard use test battery. Stabbing and thrusting into, well, first my Pell, which is multiple layers of thick cardboard, backed up by a couple of inches of compressed brown paper bag paper up against my redwood target. Yeah, this did surprisingly well. I used hammer and handshake grip, saber grip, I even flipped it sideways in a foil grip, and yeah, edge towards me North American Bowie style, and reverse grip. Yeah, great penetration, felt great in hand under those kind of impacts. Then I decided to risk taking it the next level up and doing that stabbing and thrusting directly into the redwood target, and yeah, it did fine. Now, if I stabbed this in to wood and twisted it sideways, that would probably damage it. I avoided doing that, but just stabbing it into that target at different angles did not damage the tip. And that was true of the Peacemakers as well. Peacemakers, though, different grip geometry, but I'm going to say I'm really liking this. Better than the Peacemaker? All right, to be determined as we go forward. The next test, though, oh boy, slashing and hacking at different angles into hard bamboo to see if I can intentionally induce chipper roll in a fragile edge. And here's the reason I do the test, because yeah, I did damage this edge a bit, which was the same result I got with not the Peacemaker 2, which survived the test, but the smaller Peacemaker 3. Got really chewed up. This didn't get chewed up as bad, but there was some edge damage, which is, okay, I did these tests before I even started making the video because I had both knives in hand side by side going out in the yard that day, which is why you haven't seen me show you an out-of-the-box edge test in terms of paper or cardboard. I put it to use first, and yes, I damaged it. But then I refreshed it using my handy-dandy Work Sharp field sharpener, which I may yet do a review on. Didn't take long. So let's see, after taking a little bit of chipping and rolling and getting fixed, how does it do? Yeah, a little bit of snag here and there. And a few minor chips taken out of the edge. I let some cardboard. Yeah, it's a nice slicey tool that I can get a really good grip on. Then, all right, so I've got some long straight branches in my yard I've been idly turning into walking sticks. I do a little carving from time to time when I get a break, sit out in the green. Took it to that job, and yeah, really, really great fine carving tool that feels great in hand. I feel like I have a really secure grip, lots of control, and I can get my thumb back, up on the back of it. So that's all good. Went ahead then and did some carving on a dry fir branch. Did really well. Even with the damage it took, I figured, okay, let me chop it into the wood a little bit. And I didn't expect it to bite deep. Now it did bite because it's got a keen edge, but yeah, it's too late to really bite deep. But it didn't damage the edge any further, so that's good. And then I figured I'd go ahead and push it to the max and do a little batoning. In this case, crosswise through about a 3/4 inch dry ash branch. And man, this did a great job. Sailed right through that very cleanly and took 0 damage doing so. So I'm going to have to say, despite, well, a little bit of concern I got from the bamboo test, yeah, for what I paid for this knife, it's an awesome tool and feels great in hand for utility work. What about the Marshall? All right, down to the unflattering waistline view to talk about carry and deployment. Now, the clip on this rides high enough that it does not fit in my back pocket unless I'm just dropping it in there for carry. Could fit in a jacket pocket, does fit in my front pocket clip like that, and it's not terribly visible this way, yet still, I can at least pinch a hold of it and push off on it. I can deploy it that way. But what I've been defaulting to, because it works pretty well, is just going ahead and clipping it to my belt. And again, it's not a huge struggle to get it on or get it off, but yeah, it's not too much in my way. Yeah, it's a little stiff. Sometimes I snag it for sitting down, but it's handy. And deployment, again, lockup is positive, so I've got good retention, but I'm not struggling to get it in. And yeah, putting it away, very convenient. So very handy setup. Simple, but effective. Before we get into martial potential, as always, we have to touch upon what's become the driving philosophy of the series based on the wise words of Jorge Prina, that the best martial knife for you is not only the one you have on you when you need it, and I hope you never need it for that, but the one that you use the most for the most things. Therefore, you're more likely to have it on you when you need it, but also you're the most comfortable and familiar with it. That balance between martial and utility use that's also very good for optics. I know knife guys that carry one knife for utility and another knife as a self-defense tool, but you might be in a place with people who are sensitive to other people carrying scary weapons, and some of those people might be law enforcement. So having a knife you can justify as carrying as a tool can be a very good thing in those situations. Now, I'm going to say that this knife definitely is very useful as a utility tool. Really surprised by its performance and how much I like it, especially for, the little I paid for it. But is it useful as a martial implement? All right, martially speaking, I've got to start by making the comparison to the similar sized Peacemaker 3. Now, the grip on this, I feel, definitely leans a bit more towards the martial, with that guard specifically to, really ensure my hand's not going to slide up on the blade in stabbing and thrusting. And as I mentioned in the review of this knife, I really like the way they feel and manipulate. Love the balance, the quickness, the action, the responsiveness. Yeah, all of that really nice for a light, affordable knife. In utility use, yeah, I'm going to favor the companion because, well, it felt more useful and more comfortable doing those utility tasks. And in the martial, okay. Now, there is not a huge guard on this, but maybe enough. I'm not terribly worried about my hand slipping up on the blade. And when I did even the hard stabbing tests, it didn't budge. I really didn't feel at risk of that kind of catastrophe. Speaking of catastrophe, we talked about this in the Peacemaker review, that I really don't think these knives are designed to be throwers, but yeah, I gave it a try. I made it work. I would not make a habit out of doing it, but it survived my experiment anyway. So, really kind of light, and I really don't have a feel of the balance to throw, but I could make some use out of it. But in hand, not throwing your weapon away, yeah, I feel like I have a really good grip on this knife. It did really well in stabbing and thrusting in all sorts of different grips, including having the edge turned towards me to get that cutting action out of the stab into the target medium. I feel like between the grip I have on it and what edge belly I have, I can make good use out of a slash or a hewing cut with it as well. Now, there's nothing on the back for me to do much of a back cutting action, but I could hook a reverse stab around an obstacle in a pinch, so I have that option. Certainly don't have enough length or mass in the blade to do any kind of flat or spine striking or displace, parry another weapon, so my techniques with the blade are going to be evasive, counter-cutting, counter-thrusting. But yeah, it actually feels like it could be useful in a pinch if you needed to use it as a martial tool. Reverse grip. Okay, we got to get there first, so let's talk about transitions. Having that swell and flare does give me a nice place to index a pinch flip, so that's pretty comfortable. Now, it does kind of grab my fingers back because of its grippiness, but at least then I don't feel like I'm going to slip and lose control over the knife. Speaking of which, it is narrow enough at the top and balanced that I can do my bad habit finger twirl, which I do because, yeah, I've been doing it for so long, it's just my default. But I tend to like it more than the pinch flip, even though it's far less secure, because it keeps the blade facing in the same direction. So blade facing away from me, blade is still facing away from me. If I was pinch flipping, yeah, I would need that extra move to rotate the edge if I wanted it in the other orientation. Might not have the time, might fumble it. Again, my advice to you in a real situation, never discount what adrenaline is going to do to destroy your fine motor coordination. Never transition a knife if you're within reach of an opponent. You need plenty of space and time and calm. And I would certainly recommend either not doing it, which is why it's important to practice with the knife in all sorts of different grips, depending on how you happen to have it in hand. But yeah, if you absolutely have to, I would do it in two hands. But that's me. But in reverse grip, I've mentioned this in other fixed blade and folder videos, that I personally prefer a shorter blade in reverse grip. It's not only really powerful in the stab, and I can, yeah, get my thumb on the back of it for extra reinforcement, but I feel like I have better control and leverage over a blade of this length in slashing with the edge facing away from me at different angles than I would with a much longer knife. If I reverse the blade towards me, I get the cutting action into the media with the stab, but you don't really have anything on the forward stroke. So it's a give and take, depending on how you're going to use your knife, how you favor using a knife, what your applications are. Got a lot of possibility. Now, because this is, well, it's a plastic grip with just a very thin rubber outer coating, but there is no metal pommel. Could I use that as an impact tool? Maybe a bit. Not really going to be able to break glass with it, say, but there may be some potential there. But yeah, in the hand is a Marshall tool. It's not primarily designed for that, but in a pinch, for me, yeah, I feel like I can make really good use out of it. And as a utility tool, it's frankly excellent, especially for 16 bucks. Now, I mentioned I have some other affordable knives in the Cold Steel Light line we'll be taking a look at. Until then, as always, thank you all so much for watching, following my journey, putting up with my madness, liking, subscribing, and I hope to see you back for, well, whatever I get around to next.